No man is just a number. We are the Spy-Fi guys, and this is The Prisoner. Welcome to the Spy-Fi guys, where we cover spy facts, spy fiction, and everything in between. I'm Christian.
And I'm Zach.
Welcome to our Swinging 60s Spy Summer. All this summer, we'll be breaking with our usual formula to cover exclusively fictional spy movies and TV shows made or set during the golden age of spy cinema, the 1960s. So grab your go-go boots and put on your ascot. It's time to get groovy.
That's right, and today we're covering 1967's The Prisoner, starring Patrick McGoohan.
Yes, and we have a guest on our show today.
Hey, this is Sundeep.
Hey, Sundeep. Yeah, so Sundeep's a friend of ours. He really likes the show The Prisoner, so we thought it'd be good to have him on for this. Out of curiosity, so what's your connection with The Prisoner?
Well, I started watching this back 10 years ago, and I just really liked the show. It was very different from what I have seen at the time. I was mostly familiar with James Bond type movies, and just something that seemed very different from anything else I had watched. So I just really got into it.
I think, all the different spy movies and TV shows we're covering for this special series, it's definitely the one that's the most different. And I appreciate that, actually, because, I mean, not that I don't love 60s spy cinema and TV, but after a while, a lot of it seems the same. So this is just a breath of fresh air, I'd say.
Absolutely true. And I would almost describe it as more science fiction than spy-fi.
Yeah, I can say that. But also, and we'll get into it more, but there's definitely a lot the tropes of spy-fi, especially in the second one. But so why don't we talk about which episodes we'll be covering? So we're going to cover the very first episode, Arrival, because I've never seen the show before. And I was like, all right, if I'm going to get to this, I will at least watch the first episode so I know a vague idea of what's going on. And Zach, you want to talk about the other episode we covered?
So the other episode we're covering is called Hammer into Anvil, which was selected by Sundeep. Sundeep, do you want to explain why you selected this one?
I selected this episode because there's a lot of very iconic episodes in the series, but this particular one, it really it has number 6 turning the tables on the number 2 on the administration of the village and using the surveillance apparatus against the administrator. So I thought it was a pretty clever way of turning things around.
And I think it's a good contrast between the two, where in Arrival, number 2 is definitely in charge and number 6 is super confused. And it turns the tables right on them in that one. So yeah, these are good choices.
Another reason to pick Hammer into Anvil is the top rated episode on IMDb of the whole series, which was the same metric we used for Danger Man / Secret Agent.
Right.
Yeah, that was
actually, do you want to talk about the connection between the two?
Right. So we touched on this briefly in the Danger Man episode. The Prisoner is sort of a sequel to Danger Man / Secret Agent. It kind of depends on who you ask. A lot of the same people involved in making the first series made the second one, including obviously Patrick McGoohan, but also writers, directors, and so on.
Oh, I didn't know that. I knew it was just the same star, but I didn't know a lot of the behind-the-scenes team was the same as well. So that's really cool.
That's if I recall correctly. And I think it was advertised as Danger Man : The Prisoner or something like that when it originally came.
Interesting.
Even though they never confirmed that the character is the same.
Oh, yeah. So why don't we get into that first episode so we can really get into talking about what The Prisoner is.
Sure. So here's the IMDb summary. After resigning, a secret agent is abducted and taken to what looks like an idyllic village, but is really a bizarre prison. His warders demand information. He gives them nothing, but only tries to escape.
Yeah, I think that's a pretty good summary. So I liked this intro. At first I was like, is this the title sequence? Is this what they show at the beginning of every episode? And I was like, okay, what's going on? And we don't know his name at this point. So I'm just going to call him Patrick McGoohan. And he's in his fast little race car looking car, driving around London. He goes to an underground office. There's no audio, but we can see he's arguing with someone who I presume is his boss. All the while he's being tailed by this black car. He goes back to his flat to pack up a bunch of stuff, and they put gas through his keyhole, and he's knocked out. And as this is going on, there's a file on him that's getting all these X's like typed up over it. Like the X's are typing a big X over his photo, which I liked.
I think that picture of him is from Danger Man, but I'm not entirely sure.
Okay.
Oh.
So I'm kind of slowing us down because the opening of this series is very famous, and the first episode is different.
Yeah.
Because it's the first episode. But I do like when he's resigning, it's this empty in the sense that there's no people in it, like warehouse with this like robotic arm that just moves around.
Yeah.
It sets like the surreal science fiction-y tone right away.
This retro futuristic atmosphere, like probably it would have been like in the 60s, it would have been seen as stuff as like achievable in the near future, but not.
Right.
Well, I just gonna say that architecture with like very rounded edges and like a lot of circular shapes and stuff like that, that's straight out James Bond. That is Ken Adam. His designs, like Zach, we've only seen so far, like, or at least covered so far in our podcast, Dr. No. And he doesn't really get into those crazy designs until a few movies in. There's a little hint of it in Dr. No, but that sort of design is super Ken Adams influence. And anytime you see that kind of thing, like, well, you see a lot in the Austin Powers, that design where it feels like sort of almost futuristic, but also like retro is classic Ken Adams.
Nice.
All right, so he wakes up in a room in the village. It seems like a nice place. Like right now, I'd love to go on holiday there. That sounds great, except, minus a lot of people.
Yeah. Like at the fact that it starts off and it was almost abandoned and you only see a few people around.
That was, I didn't think about that, but yeah, you're right. It's like, there's not a lot of people there at first. Is everyone just asleep or?
My read is that it was before the day starts. So it has like that PA announcement and then everybody just goes.
Okay. Again, adding to that, like the fact that they all go at that one time adds to that sort of surrealism.
Right.
So like he gets out of his room there, like is like looking around. He goes up to a bell tower to get a better vantage point and sees like a view of pretty much the whole village. And he sees, like Sundeep said, like there's only like two other people who are like a maid and I'm not sure what the other guy was.
Like an innkeeper or something.
Yeah, something like that. And so he goes down to them and, well, actually, before he does that, like the bell that's right next to him starts ringing.
I do like how when they're running through the village, cut it in such a way it's actually hard to keep track of where number 66 is actually going. Like it's hard to get an idea in your head of what the layout of the village is or how big it actually is.
Yeah, that's very true.
Supposedly the resort where this series was shot is actually pretty small. So they have to use these kinds of camera tricks to make it seem like it's much larger than it really was.
Interesting. I would never have guessed that. All right. So he goes down to where the maid is and he asks, I need to use a phone. I was like, okay, you can make a call at the phone box. And it's like a payphone setup, although it's got like a interestingly futuristic phone, if I recall.
Yeah, that phone looks sweet. It was like some kind of science fiction-y phone.
And so the operator is like, local calls only. And they ask him for, what's your number? I don't have any number. And he goes over to what looks like one of those things you'd have at a mall, like a mall map, which has, all the different shops, except it's for the whole village. And there's a bunch of buttons on there, too. And you can do things like call for a taxi, which he tries. And a taxi driver pulls up in this little cart. And she tries English first, then French. And he's trying to get out of there. And he's like, oh, nope, only local service, which will become a theme throughout this whole episode.
Yeah.
And so she drives him around, shows him around, or number 6 asks, take me as far as you can. And apparently not very far, but drives him around the village. And number 6 asks her, why do you speak to me in French? She's like, well, we're a very international bunch here. I didn't know. You could have been Polish or Czech.
Yeah, she says it's very cosmopolitan here. You never know who you'll meet. And then when he leaves, she does a hand motion and says, be seeing you.
Oh, is that the first appearance of that? I did see that pop up a lot, but what was the hand motion?
So you make like an okay sign.
Yeah.
Which I know you're not allowed to make anymore, but you hold it up to your eye and then you just kind of like throw your hand in forward.
Interesting. All right.
Which leads me to a story of I have dressed up as number 6 for various cons.
I remember that,
because it's such an easy costume to do and you don't have to think about it. And one time at New York Comic Con, I was walking through this big crowd and I felt like this hard poke on my shoulder. It like almost hurt. And I turned around, I was like, what the heck? And this guy in like a plague doctor mask just did the hand motion without saying anything and then turned and walked away.
That's a pretty good story. Yeah. Over one of the big speakers, I have a note here that says overhead speaker, but I don't remember what the speaker said.
Oh, the speaker was just like, "Oh, it's another great day here. Everybody have a good time," or something like that.
That's right. Okay, so he goes back to his room, and outside, we've been calling him number 6 pretty much since the start, but this is when we first see that he is staying in house number 6, and that's how he has his number.
And I wrote a note here that there's a lot of creepy little touches around the house. Like, did you notice those weird little dolls that were holding the
Yeah.
cards? Yeah.
Yeah, the
Mhm.
card that says "Welcome to your home from home."
Yeah.
When he arrives at the house, the door also opens for him.
That's true. Yeah, it's a lot. There's a lot of sliding doors, or like automatically opening doors and sliding panels, which I can say would be a novelty in the '60s, definitely.
Well, Star Trek did do it first, but it still shows that even though this takes place in the real world, there's some sci-fi elements too, or it's supposed to take place in the real world.
Yeah, Star Trek came out in '66, so that's only a year out from this.
I thought it came out in 1963.
No,
Okay.
66.
Right.
63 was Doctor Who. Number 6 gets a call from number 2 and invites him over for breakfast and says it's the house with the big dome, big green dome.
Mhm.
So he goes over and enters, and at first when you enter, it's a regular house, but then you go into the dome, which is what I was referring to, the very 60s styling room. You've got almost like the egg chair, like the Dr. Evil
Right.
looking chair, which I love. Pre-pandemic, there was a restaurant in DC called Grand Trunk, which had
Grand Trunk, yeah.
downstairs those kind of seats, and every time I just loved going there because like it didn't fit the aesthetic really at all, but it's like I love these chairs.
Looking back on this set, I remember thinking it's strange because the village is very friendly, or it's trying to be friendly, even though it's rather surreal, whereas this is like just a classic villain lair.
It also reminded me of Cerebro.
Mm-hmm.
From
Well,
the
I
X-Men
think the
movies.
idea, right? I think the idea is that it's supposed to carry authority, shows
Mhm.
that number 2's in charge, but he just seems like a bad guy when he's also sort of trying to be number 6's friend at the same time.
Mhm.
So it's weird.
Yeah. So, yeah. The first number 2 is basically the nicest one in the series. Like, he even tries to be the empathetic to 6, but just the whole atmosphere of the room, it still it makes him vaguely menacing.
Oh yeah, so like, and to add on to that, not only is the room look like a villain lair, there's like a control panel in front of him, which has all these buttons, which again makes me think of like Blofeld or Dr. Evil. And like all the buttons do different things. Like one of them raises a chair from one of these like holes in the floor. But I will say I did like this. So this number two, I liked his scarf. I don't know why that stuck in my head, but I just liked his scarf that he was wearing.
He was a pretty snappy dresser.
Yeah.
It's also interesting that they knew the kind of food and tea that number 6 likes, even before, like, they had everything prepared, even before he came in.
Yeah, I like that. So he's like, where number 2 is asking him, "You for coffee or tea?" And he says tea with lemon, and it's already there because they knew exactly what he liked. So even though he's offering these options, they know what he likes and they have it ready, which is like, oh, that's creepy.
It shows that they've studied him really well.
Yeah. Do we ever really get it confirmed that he was a secret agent, or is that just alluded to?
Definitely alluded to.
It's alluded to here that he retired, or not retired, he resigned.
Yeah.
But the information in his head is like priceless, and it would be worth a lot on the open market. And so number 2 has a lot of questions about his resignation, and
Yes.
6 is trying to leave. Number 2 shows him all these photos on the wall, like as he's flipping through like his dossier.
Yeah, I didn't like this part.
No?
No, and they talk about this Chambers guy who I think never comes up later. This is like totally unnecessary. Just say he's a secret agent. He resigned. Keep it mysterious. We don't need to know who he works for or exactly what he did. It's just not relevant to the story. I don't know why it's there.
I mean, we don't know really. From here, we aren't told who he works for or anything. So I think it's even more vague than what you're describing.
I think the point of this isn't so much to fill out number 6's background. It's to say that they've been monitoring him for a long time.
Yeah,
like
just to hammer in points.
Yeah, like they were watching him while he was meeting with his coworker,
one of his contacts or something,
or one of his contacts or something.
Yeah, so we don't even know who this guy was. So yeah, I think it's appropriately conveyed. So that is interesting. So they next go for a helicopter ride to see the village from the air. And number 2 points out all the different things, like the council building. Apparently, their council is democratically elected. There's only one restaurant, seemingly.
Right.
Yeah.
Well, of course, the democratically elected council is pretty funny.
Yeah. And I like all the passive aggressiveness between 6 and 2.
There's a newspaper. They have their own graveyard and social club.
Well, there's a couple kind of funny things here where number 2 says, we have everything here, water, electricity. I was like, I don't think that really qualifies as everything.
Yeah.
And he also says, when talking about the graveyard, you'll be the death of me.
I didn't catch that. That's funny. Yeah, and apparently there's also the Citizen Advice Bureau, which is to help out anyone who's new, apparently. He also hints that keep your eyes open. You never know who you might meet, including people who might know you or you know.
Right. So there's this theory that I was thinking about. So fans have all kinds of theories about this show, but one of them is that the village is all built for number 6. Is that everybody there is a jailer. So I was hoping the episode Hammer and Anvil had this speech, but it doesn't. So I'm going to talk about it now.
Okay.
Where he has this speech to all these people gathered in the village. Sundeep, you'll probably remember this, where he's like, unlike me, many of you have decided to remain here where you will die like rotten cabbages. But make no mistake, I will find who are the prisoners and who are the wardens. But anyway, so the idea here is that, like, if you meet someone he knows, they're in on it. And if you meet someone from his past, they're in on it. It's not a prison for spies. It's a prison for him.
Huh. Interesting. This is where it gets the most surreal. What the hell is up with the ball?
The ball's Rover.
Well, yeah, the ball is Rover. It's an iconic part of the series.
All right, so for those who don't know what we're talking about, so there's a scene here where number 2 is like up on a balcony with a megaphone talking down to number 6 about how everything's idyllic here, everything's great, and giving me instructions on where to walk. And then he says, stop. And everyone stops, except for one dude who's like panicking. Why is he panicking? I don't know. This white ball comes up from the fountain, does it look like? Is that where it came from?
Yes.
Yeah.
That's right.
From the fountain in the middle, at this point, it's only like the size of like a tennis ball. Expands to like, I don't know, to compare it to size-wise.
It's like the size of a Volkswagen Beetle.
Yeah, so sure, let's go with that. And it like envelops him and kills him?
That's right.
Maybe?
And it incapacitates him. And then 6 asks 2 what that was, and 2 replies that would be telling.
Which will show up later in the opening. Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah, okay, I remember that from the opening of the next episode.
So it's a little convenient that this guy just happened to freak out and they needed Rover to incapacitate him when 6 was standing there.
Or was it all a plant to just freak him out?
I think I'm going to keep defending this theory that everybody is in on it for the rest of this episode.
Interesting. All right. Together, 2 and 6 go into the Citizen Advice Bureau. And there's a sign here that I love. That was like, questions are a burden to others. Answers a prison for oneself.
It's very like 1984 type stuff.
Yeah. So I'm going to refer to this place as like control room. Because this is where you get more of that sort of... It looks like the dome, but it's set up differently.
Right.
More like 60s architecture. This is where he gets like an aptitude test. Oh wait, no, this is not the dome. This is not the control room that I was thinking of. This is another place. But again, there's a lot of 60s architecture.
I wonder if it's the same set and they just have something different inside.
Oh, for what? For the control room and the dome?
Yeah.
Oh yeah, definitely. But I think this is a different set because this is the architecture set up differently.
Okay.
And then there's like these Tinker Toys that are... It's like a Tinker Toy Ferris wheel that's like spinning in between him and the guy who's trying to get him to do these tests. I was like, that's really distracting. And as soon as I think that's distracting, number 6 like throws it down and breaks them. I'm like, oh, poor guy who probably spent all of his free time setting those up. So, and he like storms out of there and goes back to his house. And when he gets there, there's a woman in there who she says that she's his personal maid. He dismisses her. Again, we get a lot of sliding doors and walls. And so he's like goes around the house searching for everything. There's a weird amount of lava lamps in this show.
It was the 60s.
It's true.
Yeah.
But he goes, and then he like finds the radio and smashes it over one of the intercoms. Someone says, "Please go to number 6 where adjustment is needed."
It doesn't
Yeah.
just, it happens like as he's destroying it.
Oh yeah, that's right. Okay.
Even though he smashes the radio, he never actually gets it to stop playing. Like it's constantly.
True. Yeah. This is interesting because like most of from a lot of times in shows, if there's like a soundtrack playing, it's not heard by the people in the show. But this is I guess is that diegetic music? Is that what it's called?
I
Or it's
always mix them up.
Yeah, the music that we hear is being played over the radio, so he can hear it too. But yeah, like Sundeep said, yeah, he's smashing the radio, but doesn't turn off. And then the maid comes back and says she forgot something, and like he starts to question her, and she's like, "I don't know anything. She's been there as long as she can remember. Her parents died." And she says, "We have a saying here: a still tongue makes a happy life."
So the implication with this part is that she's another prisoner who got like co-opted into playing a role in the village, which may be what they were going for. As defense of my theory, that's all lies. She's just lying through her teeth. It's all crocodile tears.
Actually, wasn't there a scene right afterwards where I think it was number 2 and someone else were monitoring the whole exchange between the maid and number 6?
Yep.
And it's implied that the maid was a plant. Like they put her up
It's
to.
a little so what the maid says is that she was offered her freedom in exchange for gaining his confidence. We cut to that scene. So I think this is in the control room. You're right, Zach. I think they're basically the same set, but one of them has like the seesaw thing in the middle of it.
That seesaw is great.
It's like a seesaw with 2 people on it, and they're like watching different feeds, and there's maps around the whole dome. But yeah, so they're watching number 6 in the control room, and yeah, like Sundeep was saying, someone in there is saying she almost had him, but number 2 is like, no, he's a different sort of man. We'll need to try something new.
Yeah, he also says, "You know how important this is."
Do we?
No. That's what number 2 says.
I know, but that's like, but do we know? Because we don't. Because I'm following everything, but I'm still very confused by this, and I'm sure that's intentional.
Right.
Yeah, that's absolutely intentional.
Yeah.
It's sort of unclear. Again, I don't want to keep bringing up the theory, but it's like, okay, I guess it's pretty clear now that number 6 isn't just another brick in the wall. He isn't just another spy who resigned suddenly and got put on this island or whatever.
But do we know that everyone else is a spy?
We don't know nothing.
Yeah.
All
right. So we next have he tries to go through the woods to see if he can find a place to escape, and then the ball comes, or Rover's the name of the ball.
That's right.
Yeah.
All right. So Rover comes out after him. As he's doing this, they're watching him in the control room, and the sculptures are like have cameras built into them, so they're like turning and watching him. He runs from Rover, and as he gets further out, they start escalating the alerts. So first it starts with a yellow alert, and then it goes up to an orange alert. At one point, they send a golf cart thing to chase after him on the beach, but he knocks out the guards. It was a brief fight scene, but it was a good fight.
I liked that it was on like a golf cart.
Yeah.
So like it feels like it's going fast because of the way it's filmed, but I feel like it couldn't have been.
At least compared to like running. Like if you're running, it'll feel like they're going fast if you're trying to catch up to one. So he steals the cart, they bump it up to orange alert, and then Rover comes after him and captures him.
So Rover is scary to British people, I've heard. So you know how like British people are afraid of Daleks, and we don't understand why, because Daleks are really silly looking?
I think part of that is just depends on when they started watching Doctor Who. Like they probably started watching it when they were very young, because I'd be like, Doctor Who is supposed to be a kid's show. Yes,
and this show isn't supposed to be a kid's show really, but I think a lot of people watch it as kids because it is family friendly. There's no blood or sex or anything in it. Many British people have told me, actually, when I first watched this, it was when I was studying abroad in New Zealand, that they find the image of the guy's face in Rover, where it's all like stretched out. They find
all right, that I will give you, because that is disconcerting, we'll say. All right, so he wakes up in the hospital, and there's this creepy old woman sitting next to his bed, like knitting, and number 6 sees someone who he knows in a bed nearby, Cobb. So he asks him, like, how long have you been here? And Cobb says, 3-4 weeks, maybe months. It's hard to tell here. And at this point, when
Right.
he's trying to talk to Cobb more, this is when the doctor comes and wants to check up on him and get a clear read on, all right, if there's anything wrong with him. So they walk through different parts of the hospital. And there's these doors with like circular windows with purple light coming from them.
Mm-hmm.
And each time he looks into them, there's something different. But yeah, so he goes over to the exam room, which of course has more lava lamps.
Of course.
The machine examines him and then spits out a punch card like the Batman 66.
Yeah,
Which I
I
liked.
noticed that. It's supposed to have a punch card, and the doctor just reads it like, "Oh yeah, you're fine."
All right,
Because
Sundeep,
that-
so as someone who has medical expertise, if someone handed you a punch card, would you have any idea what it would say?
I wouldn't even know what to do with it because I wouldn't even know where to find a machine that could read a punch card.
Oh man.
Again, it's like Star Trek, where Dr. McCoy like looks at all the little gauges above the med bed or whatever, and he's like, "Oh, they're fine," or
Yeah,
"Oh
but
shit, they're
that's a
gonna
real
die."
thing. Like, actually, this is a random aside, but all the gauges and the monitor above your deck or above a bed in sick bay in Star Trek, someone got inspired by that to say, "Oh, we should actually have people's stats on the monitor next to them in a hospital." And so it's because of Star Trek that those things exist.
Oh, that's interesting.
Yeah.
I've definitely
know
seen
that.
those, but I didn't know they were inspired by Star Trek.
This may be wrong, but I remember reading this. Yeah, the doctor reads the punch card and says, "Oh, you're absolutely fit." And said, "We'll get you some new clothes." And Six is like, "What happened to my old clothes?" "Oh, we burned them." Why? Who knows?
He cut him off from his old life.
Maybe Roller just ruined his clothes or something, but I think I like Zach's theory better.
Thank you.
So he goes back to his bed, and we find out that Cobb jumped out the window, and he's dead. We don't see it. We're just told this.
Mm-hmm. Sure, he did.
And also, this is where we first see his iconic jacket, black blazer with white piping, which I like that look, actually.
Yeah, it looks great. And he has a hat, but he doesn't wear it for very long.
Oh, that's right, the straw hat, yeah. He's wearing like a blue turtleneck, which I appreciate, yeah. Because I enjoy turtlenecks. And I enjoyed turtlenecks before Archer.
God.
They also give him a free ride home on one of the taxis.
Right.
And as he's going home, like it goes past number 2's house, and so he like jumps out of the taxi and runs over to inside. This is the first of the number 2 switches.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I like how the new number 2 is much crueler. Like he is much more focused on extracting information, and I think he says something like, "If you won't give us what we want, we'll take it from you." Like he makes no attempt to be nice or friendly to number 6 the way the old number 2 was.
Do you think it's because number 6 tried to escape?
Maybe.
Maybe actually.
I forgot to mention this with the costume, but I'm wearing an original number 6 badge. The lighting is kind of washed out, but you're gonna have to take my word for it.
All right.
And
wow.
I bought it at like a thrift store for like $3.
Nice.
That's pretty awesome. Wait,
Unfortunately, it's kind of too degraded to actually wear as part of the costume, nor would I want to risk it anyway. But
so this is actually part of the show? Like
I think so. I think it was used as part of the filming. Yeah,
Ooh,
that's what they told me, and they wouldn't lie to me at a thrift store, would they?
That is really cool. All right, I was wondering what that was. Wait, so and we haven't talked about this, but there's a thing with like the old-fashioned bicycles with the giant wheels and the giant front wheel and the tiny back wheels.
The penny farthings bicycles.
Is that what? Is that? I didn't know. First of all, I knew a penny farthing was a thing. I didn't know what it was, and I also didn't know that was a name for those kind of bicycles. Yeah.
No, yeah, that's what it's called, but it's just the symbol of the village.
Okay, because I noticed a lot of people wearing like a pin with that. Did number 6 have one of those as well?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Huh, interesting. As this is all going on, and he's talking to the new number 2, he's demanding to know what happens to Cobb. Number 2 doesn't give him anything and says that his only chance to get out is to give them information. But number 6 obviously doesn't, and he goes back to his house, and as he's out the window, he sees a parade. Well, it's not just a parade, it's actually a processional, but it's with the brass band in front. It seems very happy, but not like New Orleans has their like jazz funeral processions. So it wasn't like that, but it was just like a very, I don't know, very surreal.
Yeah.
It was inappropriately cheerful.
Yeah, that. Thank you, Sundeep. That's exactly what it was.
Well, they're finally free.
As there's the procession going, there's a woman who's trailing behind the procession, not with everyone else. So number 6 goes after her and confronts her, and she's like watching the funeral over a cliff, not up close to it.
I just wanted to say, I thought it was a little weird the way he ran up to her and grabbed her and like manhandled her.
That's something they love to do in these old movies. And by old, I mean like older than the 1980s.
I would say even into the 90s they do that.
I mean,
fair enough.
even considering you were talking about the movie Night and Day recently, not too long ago. So I think even into the 2000s.
Yeah.
being
Oh, yeah.
weird with
I don't
women.
think Tom Cruise ever grabs Cameron Diaz by the shoulders and like shakes her. He does
No.
plenty of other scary stuff, but that's not one of them.
And for more on that, go back and listen to our Night and Day podcast if you haven't, because I think it is one of my favorites, actually. But let's get back to The Prisoner. So she claims to this woman who we never really learned her name, do we?
Well, nobody
Yeah.
has a name in The
Yeah,
Prisoner.
but she doesn't even have a number.
I think
I
she's
think
number
she has a
9.
number 39 or something like that. I don't
Yeah,
know.
okay.
Maybe they said it.
They
All
never
right.
say it, but it's there on her pin.
Oh, okay.
Mhm.
Oh, I never caught. See, that's what I was wondering. I never caught that everyone's number is on their pins.
Maybe you need to watch it in high definition or whatever.
Maybe, or I don't know. Yeah, the woman claims not to know Cobb, but says that she wants to help number 6. But she doesn't know whether or not she can trust him. Number 6 is like, all right, well, we need to talk again, meet again. When do we meet? 12 o'clock at the concert. So they meet at the brass band concert. She says she knows a way out and that they're going to steal a helicopter. But to steal it and to get away, they need an electro pass, which will help him get, past everything.
Right.
Was the Electropass a weird little watch thing that beeps?
Yes.
I also like that he can fly a helicopter apparently because he's just
Of
that.
He's a spy.
He's the man. Yeah.
And I feel like we talked about helicopters recently, but just to reiterate, flying a helicopter is not like flying a plane. It's a lot
Nope.
more complicated,
Yes.
which makes it even more impressive that Tom Cruise learned to fly a helicopter just for Mission Impossible
Oh
Fallout.
my God.
But
You
I'm
bring
getting
up
out of
Tom
hand
Cruise
here.
every episode. I don't
I'm
think
not
Patrick McGoohan was flying this helicopter.
I'm not the first person to bring up Tom Cruise on this podcast.
That's true. But then we find out that this woman, 39 or whatever, is a spy for number 2.
Yeah, so she's meeting with the new number 2, and they're talking about that her last assignment was Cobb, and it's a pity what happened to him, and you're getting a new assignment, and she gets a folder, and of course inside the folder is a photo of number 6.
So I guess it's like a flashback is the idea?
I don't think so.
I think it's not clear when that exchange takes place.
It is actually, and I'll talk about it because number 6 sees her leaving number 2's place.
Oh yeah.
So number 6 is playing chess with an older man who's there, and she sees the woman. So they meet over in the stone boat. So wait, this boat.
Yeah.
There's no way that she gets out on the water, right? It is that's why it's called the stone boat, because it's just on the beach, and
Yeah.
you can't
That's right.
take it in the water.
I think they filmed this at some kind of resort.
Okay, I was wondering about that too, because
Yeah.
I would visit that place. That looks cool. Again, if I were not imprisoned there, yeah, sure.
Yeah. It's a real resort in Wales.
Wales. All right.
So I think the stone boat is for kids to play on.
Okay, makes sense. But yeah, so she gives him the Electro Pass, and it's hidden in a watch, but not just any watch. It's a Hamilton watch, which is a nice watch brand.
Mhm.
I'm trying to remember if Bond used the Hamilton watch at any point, because I know that brand, but I don't remember why I know that brand. Number 6 confronts her about seeing her at number 2's, and he's suspicious, but she's like, no, don't worry about it. I want to help you get out. And she says, go now before it's too late. 6 goes after the helicopter and is being real, it's very sneaky. We got some sneaky music here. But of course,
Yes.
Rover is right there.
That's right, but he has the watch, and so Rover doesn't attack him.
Yeah.
Though it cuts up right in his face.
It does. The Electro Pass allows 6 to get into the helicopter. He starts it up and flies away. And as he's flying, the control room is watching him and seeing him. And number 2 gives a nod or gives a look to someone, and they pull a lever. And as that lever activates an autopilot that won't let him fly away from the village. So he gets out decently far out at sea, and then it turns him back, and he's struggling with controls, but he can't you can't fight it.
I was watching this with Alana.
Yeah.
Well, she came in towards the end. She didn't like it because it's too old. But she was like, instead of fighting the controls, you should be looking around for landmarks or something to try to escape later. I don't think there were any to see.
No, there were. It didn't look like it. As this is happening, the woman is near the guy who 6 was playing chess with earlier. Offers her, game of chess? You should learn. We're all pawns.
Yeah, the "we're all pawns" was a little on the nose. It's get it? Do you get it?
I liked it.
I like it
Also,
too.
considering this is probably when this was made, the chess metaphor was not overplayed at that point, as
Yeah,
it is
fair
now.
enough.
But yeah, so the chopper lands back in the control room. We find out that Cobb isn't dead. And he's like all dressed up in a suit with like a bowler hat and an umbrella. He looks like, what's his name? John Steed from the British Avengers TV show is what he looks like.
I can see that.
And so Cobb's like, you should let him keep the watch. Now that they know that he has it, he can't use it again, really.
Well, no, like it'll be a reminder that escape is futile or whatever.
I didn't catch that line. That's good. That's good.
Yeah, that was really nice, actually.
So Cobb's leaving. He says, I mustn't keep my new masters waiting. That begs the question, all right. And we'll never know the answer to this question, I assume. Did he give up secrets and now that's how he got out? Or has he been working for them the whole time? I don't know. Well, he does say new masters, so maybe he did, and that's how he got out. But we'll never really know.
Nope.
As this is happening, so yeah, the chopper lands. Six gets out of the chopper. Rover is pushing him around.
But doesn't attack him this time.
Doesn't attack him, no, but it's just like nudging him around, trying to get him to go in a certain direction. And that's the end of the first episode.
That's right. So I just have one thing I wanted to comment from The Prisoner Ultimate Series Companion, which came with my DVDs.
Nice.
Is that at one point he says his birthday, number 6 is his birthday,
does, yes.
which is March 19th, 1928, and that is Patrick McGoohan's real birthday.
I was wondering about that.
And it's weird for someone to be born in 1928.
Yeah.
You know?
Is Patrick McGoohan dead?
Yes. He died in like 2015 or something like that.
All right.
Oh, yeah.
Okay, so we're going to wait to do ratings and sci-fi versus fiction until the end of the second episode. But for now, do you have any favorite quotes from Arrival?
I do. I have one.
Okay.
I've resigned. I will not be pushed, filed, stamped, indexed, briefed, debriefed, or numbered.
Wait, Sundeep, I don't know if we told you that we do quotes, but do you have one?
I did like the "We're all pawns here, my dear." That's towards the end.
Okay. Yeah, that's a good one. And then I have a couple. I don't know who you are and what you work for, and I don't care. I'm leaving. I didn't deliver that as well as Patrick McGoohan did. And then, of course, later he says, I am not a number, I am a person.
Yes.
Which is after they say he's number 6. And then finally...
is interesting because if you remember in the Secret Agent Man lyrics, there's a line in there that says, we're giving you a number and taking away your name. Yeah, which is ironic, especially if it is a prequel to The Prisoner.
The song, of course, was written before The Prisoner even came out.
I know, exactly. That's why I think it's so interesting. Yeah. Or they were inspired by that.
Somehow, I don't think so. And then I have one last quote that I liked, which is from Cobb, or whoever he is. He says, don't be too harsh on the girl. She was most upset at my funeral. So I like that.
Yeah, that's a good one, too.
This first episode had a lot of good dialogue. Hi, Spy-Fi fans. We have a promotion for you.
This is not an ad.
No, it is not.
We're offering you a chance to win a free Spy-Fi Guys t-shirt if you live in the US or Canada.
All you have to do is leave a 5-star review for this podcast on iTunes and use the code word SUMMER in the review.
That's the code word SUMMER.
You have until the end of the Swinging 60s summer, so the end of September 2021.
We will select our winner at random from all the entries received.
Again, that's a 5-star written review with the code word SUMMER for your chance to win.
Good luck, and thank you for listening.
But let's move on to the second one now. Hammer into Anvil.
Yeah.
Number 6 vows revenge and goes after a sadistic number 2 after he drives a fellow village resident to her death.
Yeah, so we start this episode... Well, first of all, we get the actual credit sequence, which, like I said previously, we didn't get that in the first episode because the first episode's different. And so we get a bunch of quotes from the first episode, they want information. And also this is where, we get confirmation that it's not just the old number 2 now again, it's a number 2 keeps changing.
I think every episode they say, well, actually not every opening. They don't always say I'm the new number 2. Sometimes they just say I am number 2.
Okay.
So this opening is really famous. I'm sure you probably heard a reference before. And the inner play, like the inter dialogue, is in the opening of an Iron Maiden song, which is why a lot of people know it.
Interesting. I did not know that.
Yeah. So Bill Burr, the comedian who I follow, he has never seen the show, but he likes Iron Maiden. So every now and then on his podcast, when he's like information, he'll be like information. We want information.
Interesting. That's hilarious. That like because of that, it has become a touchstone with a separate audience from those who have watched The Prisoner.
Well, it is a very iconic and very stylish intro, so I can see why it would have that kind of impact.
Yeah.
On pop culture.
We'd, of course, would be remiss not to mention "I am not a number, I am a free man," which is a really famous line.
Mm-hmm.
And they sell a T-shirt with that quote on it from the like official prisoner store, but it has periods at the end of each sentence. I'm like, the way he says it feels more like exclamation points to me.
Yeah, he's yelling this on top of his lungs.
Yeah. I don't know if you guys have seen this, but San Diego Comic-Con sometimes gets protested by the Westboro Baptist Church.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
And they do counter protests where it's like people in costumes with various themed signs. So like it's like a Star Trek guy with a sign that says "God hates the Jedis," stuff like that.
All right.
So if I ever had the chance, it'd be kind of cool to wear the prisoner costume and just have a sign that says "I'm not a number, I'm a free man," and it works in any context.
It does. Oh, that'd be pretty good. We start this episode in the hospital, and we see number 73, who's a woman. Apparently, is in the hospital. She tried to slash her wrist, or she slashed her wrist. She didn't try. She didn't succeed in her attempt to commit suicide. And number 2 is there, a different number 2 this time. Oh, he tempts her with like information about like where her husband is. Claims that her husband is having an affair with another woman, and she's not cooperating. So he threatens her and makes her scream. Number 6 is outside the hospital, walking past, hears the screaming, runs up to try to help. Before he gets inside and in the room, she jumped out the window to her death.
Just like Cobb supposedly did in episode number 1.
But this time we see it, and we see the body like outside the window. It's not gory, but you see the body on the ground.
Mm-hmm.
And number 6 shouts to number 2, "You'll pay for this."
Okay, I'm going to give away my favorite quote right now. This is my favorite quote. Number 2 says, "You'll pay for this. You shouldn't have interfered." Number 6, "You'll pay for this." Number 6 says, "No, you will."
Okay, so I was
right,
but also wrong.
Mm.
But yeah, so back at his house, number 6 is summoned by number 2, but he refuses, goes out walking instead. And there's some goons in like striped shirts who send after him, who reminded me of like henchmen in the Batman 66 show.
They're totally henchmen.
I guess wearing striped shirts was more badass back in the 60s.
maybe. But yeah, so they beat him up and bring him to number 2. So in the dome, number 6 is getting interrogated by this number 2, and he gets slapped in the face by number 2. And then he gives this quote about how the title of the episode is "You must be anvil or hammer."
Right.
German? I'm trying to remember now.
Yeah, he says something in German about it.
German quote by Goethe.
Goethe, yeah.
Mm-hmm.
"Du musst Ambrus oder Hammer sein."
Yeah, so you must be the
Anvil or
hammer.
hammer.
Anvil.
Yeah.
Yep.
And he threatens to break number 6 because he's a hammer.
Mm-hmm. So the war is on, in other words.
Yep. But as he's trying to do this interrogation, number 2 gets a call on the very cool retro futuristic phones, which are cordless, which I feel like was not a thing like in the 60s. That's a big thing.
Yeah, I think the first actual cordless phone was invented like a few years after the show aired. So
I believe that.
Yeah.
But yeah, and so like they're like asking him, "What's going on? Is everything under control?" He's like, "No, I don't need any assistance." Number 6 is basically waiting while this going on. Is like, "I'm sorry, you were saying?"
Well, he senses like weakness there
that
he can exploit because he's the man. He's so cool.
And so number 2 like shouts at number 6, saying, "Get out!"
Mm-hmm.
And then number 2 orders special surveillance on number 6, and it's like anything happens and he does anything weird, report to number 2 personally.
Mm-hmm.
I really like this episode. But this is where the machinations start.
Right.
So number 6 goes to the grocer in the or the shop. I just call it the grocer. I didn't know if he actually had a name.
Mm-hmm.
And he sees that they got some new records in. So he says, "All right, there's one particular record called L'Arlésienne. It's by what's the artist's name? Bizet. You're right. So he wants to listen to not just one copy of it, but like all the copies that they have of it. And there's like I think 3 or 4 different copies.
Mm-hmm.
And so there's a booth in the back where it's like It's like the cone of silence from
Get Smart, which we
Get
haven't
Smart.
covered yet, but
no,
yeah,
but we will.
we know what it is.
Yes. Where like you put the record in and then you put your head in this big plastic tube and that's where you listen to it, which is cool. Like that's an interesting idea. And maybe in the days if there are actually record stores or Barnes and Nobles left, if you don't want to put headphones over someone else that someone else may have touched, maybe this is a better idea.
Yeah, it's more
Seems
sanitary.
easier to clean too. Like it's clear, so you can see. All right, that's definitely dirty. Now I need to clean it.
Except that what you listen to fills the whole store, so everybody's listening on what you're getting.
That's the purpose of the dome, is so you can hear without like it being like. I assume it's piped in, so the acoustics will, it'll be louder than if you had headphones on, but it won't be as loud as say if you're just playing it with it on a speaker.
Mm-hmm.
But he only plays like the first 5 or 10 seconds of each record, and as he's doing so, he's like looking at his watch, making notes. And then he returns all of them to the grocer and says, no, it's not an adequate recording. And when he does that, he also leaves a newspaper that he was writing notes on. And the grocer notices and sees that the word security is circled on the newspaper.
I felt bad that I couldn't figure out what number 6 was doing here for a long time.
As soon as he's like, oh, he's up to something. I'm like, all right, what's he doing? I didn't get it immediately, but once things started happening, oh, I know exactly what he's doing, and it's brilliant. So the grocer calls number 2 and brings over the records. And so in the dome, number 2 is listening to all the records. He thinks that they're all identical, and the grocer is telling him exactly what number 6 did. And he wasn't sure why he was doing this what was different, but he shows him the paper where it has this security circle. And so they look at the cameras in number 6's house, and he's making some notes on a paper. And so they go in and send someone in to go into number 6's house to see what he wrote down on the paper. And who they send in is number 14.
Yes.
Right. It's 2's henchmen.
Yeah.
This,
now, we've not met this number 14 before in the show, have we?
I don't think so. I think this is his own.
Well, according to the Ultimate Guide.
Oh, yes?
The actor has been in an earlier episode, but as a different character.
Okay, all right.
It's just the nature of the show that permanent, except for number 6 and the dwarf guy, who we haven't talked about yet.
What about the grocer? Because actually, now that I think about it, the grocer is different.
Right, yeah, everybody's different.
Interesting. All right.
Mm-hmm.
So number 14 goes into number 6's house and does he grab the papers or the paper underneath? I wasn't clear.
Oh, I don't know.
There's a much easier way to do that. Here's a spy tip for you guys if you want to find out what someone had written. If someone had written a note on a notepad and and taken that with them, but the paper's underneath still, get a pencil, just shade over it. You can see what indentations they were made. It's a lot easier than doing whatever the heck number 2 is trying to do.
Oh, with his computer or whatever?
Yeah, It's so much easier to do it that way. On the paper, we find a note that says 2x04. Reference your query via Bizet record. Number 2 instability confirmed. Detailed report follows. D5. Or no, D6. What does that mean? Who knows?
Well, he figures out pretty quickly that he's spying on number 2.
Or that's what he wants number 2 to think.
That's right.
Yeah, so we next go to number 6 on his bed. He's reading something, goes over to the window and looks out, doesn't see anything. So he gets a portfolio, like a bunch of papers hidden in his bed, I like this, underneath his nicely folded sheets, right under where you fold the sheets back over the comforter. That's where he has it hidden.
Right.
Leaves his house, and as this is all happening, 2 and 14 are watching him, and they follow him as he goes towards the beach. He goes towards different areas near the beach. Then he goes towards a stone boat, goes into the cabin, and then comes out. And so they think that he left the packet there, which of course he did, and they find it.
Yes, just they were supposed to.
So they take it back to number 2's house, and number 14 is told to leave because he's like, I want to know. He's like, no, you don't get to know. You're not important enough.
So he basically just kicks out number 14 right there.
Yeah.
And so he calls someone. He calls the laboratory and says, send someone over here. I need you to like analyze something. And okay, were they in the house? Like, are they in? Is the laboratory in number two's house? Because like they come over pretty quick.
It doesn't say where they are. You should probably know that when number two first looks at the papers, are all blank. Like there's nothing on any.
Oh,
of
that's
them.
true. Yeah, I didn't mention that. Yeah, all the papers are blank, and so he's like, "What?" He's like, "All right, there's got to be something on here," because clearly, yeah, there was something on the last thing. So obviously, there must be something here.
I also would be suspicious that it's actually number two's house. It's more likely his office.
Well, it's in the dome, and he refers to it as his house in the first episode. That's why it was. I'm calling it his house.
I guess he could live in the village just like everybody else. Yeah.
Well, I mean, yeah, okay, yeah, it may not actually be his house, but number
Close
two,
enough,
the very
yeah.
first number two says, "Come to my house for breakfast." So I just think of it as his house, even if may not actually be his house.
Right.
But it was just interesting to me that like he calls them over, and then very quickly they're like pop up at the door, and so
that's true.
Yeah, so they grab the papers from him, test them out, and the lab can't find anything.
Well, and then he starts to crack.
Yeah, because
he's
number
like,
two is like incredulous and like suspects the lab techs are hiding something from him. He's just gone. He's already started down that path.
Yeah.
Yep.
The next day, number 6 goes over to a booth and says, "I want to put an ad in the personal section," and it's a quote from Don Quixote in Spanish. And so this is what took me a long time to try to get this, because I was trying to figure out what this quote was. And if I just finished watching the episode, they would have told it to me. But I was like, so my wife, Carolyn, who's appeared on the podcast before, she can speak Spanish. But she was like, his accent is terrible.
Yeah, it didn't sound too good.
But yeah, so the quote is, see, my accent is probably just as bad. Y hay más mal en Antigua que se suena. Something to that effect. Apologies to any of our Spanish listeners, because I have the terrible... but it translates to, there is more evil in the village than it sounds. Or actually, later on, number 2 gives a different translation, but that's pretty much what it is.
Yeah, he says there's more danger in the village than it seems, or something like that.
So yeah, so he goes over to a phone booth, or I guess the phone booth, since it's only one phone in all of the village.
Apparently, yeah.
Or at least one for public access.
Right.
And he goes over and calls the psychiatry ward, and asks for the report on number 2. And the guy who picks up there is very confused. And 6 is like, you're right. Yes, best not to discuss it over the phone.
Yeah, that was great.
I mean, the key here is like, first of all, it's the head of the psychiatry department at the hospital.
Yeah.
And the other thing is that even though the village has all these surveillance devices, they're only hearing one side of the conversation. They're only hearing what number 6 is saying. They're not hearing the responses from the... Are
you sure?
The head of the department. Yeah.
I guess we only hear that recorded, but I feel like even though they probably heard what he said too, what the head of the psychiatry, but I think
he's the suspicious one.
Yeah, true. Yeah. So, but yeah, so they bring in number 2 brings in the head of psychiatry into the dome, and like interrogates him. Like, why would he be calling you if he doesn't have anything to say to you? I was like, I don't know. I didn't know who it was. And so he said, all right, well, I'll prove to you that it was number 6 on the oscilloscope, because apparently voices are like fingerprints and everyone is unique. And so they do this thing so I think this is a real thing in oscilloscope, because when I put it into my autocorrect, it came up with that word. It's like, oh, okay.
Yeah, it's a thing that like can read like waves, but
okay.
I don't think you can use it for identifying voices or anything.
But I'm like, why did they have this part? Because we, the audience, know that it's number 6.
I think it's to...
just to show that number 2 is cracking, that he's going to these lengths to really prove that's number 6.
It's like trying to convince himself as well as the other guy.
Yeah, but I like this too, because as someone who's had to do a little podcast editing, just seeing the waves and like matching them up, I'm like, oh yeah, this looks familiar. Well, yeah, so next we go to the brass band concert, and number 6 is walking past it. And apparently, as he walked past, he talked to the band leader. The band leader reports to number 2 that number 6 asked him to play, let me see if I can pronounce this again, I have it phonetically written out.
It's like some other pretentious Spanish,
No,
Italian song or
it's
whatever.
the same
The
song.
same song. That's the key.
Uh-huh.
It's the same song from
La
the
Lucien.
beginning.
Oh,
La
okay.
Lucien, yeah.
hmm
The band leader's like gets interrogated by number 2 about why would he say this? Clearly, you have to know something. So he starts suspecting everyone.
Yeah, which of course was the idea.
Yeah, and so number 6 goes over to visit number 73's grave, and I don't know if he left those flowers or someone else left those flowers, but there are flowers there.
hmm
And as he's leaving, he sees number 113's tombstone, and he gets an idea. And he leaves a note in a box which does radio announcements.
hmm
And so over the radio, there's a message that's read from 113 to number 6. Warmest greetings on your birthday. May the sun shine on you today and every day. And of course, number 2 hears this, freaks out, and tries to find out who number 113 was.
Yeah.
Number 2 and 14 go over to the control room, confronts everyone, and they're all staring at him like, what the hell are you on about? And he's like, says to the supervisor, well, clearly something's wrong because today is not number 6's birthday and 113 is dead. Covert message for number 6.
So if 113 is dead, that means they don't just use the number again. So it's like a jersey in the NFL. Like if you die, then they retire your number.
Maybe.
There's only going to be one number 6 for
Which
the rest of the
raises one of my questions, and I forgot to talk about this last episode. Like, if there are like people who've been there forever who have much higher numbers, why is he number 6? I guess it's just showing that he's that important again.
It's further evidence for the theory that it's all about him. The village actually hasn't been around that long.
But they have their own graveyards. How long of those must have been?
Just because it's a graveyard doesn't mean anybody's in it.
Yeah,
but there clearly is, because 113 is dead, they said.
That's what they said. That doesn't mean there ever actually was 113.
Except that there was, because number 2 is like, number 113 has been dead for a while. How could they be sending messages to number 2? So if they didn't exist, he wouldn't be freaking out like that.
Or this number 2 hasn't been informed about everything.
Maybe. That's
which I'm inclined to believe, which leads me to sort of my issue kind of with the premise of this episode, is that you'd think number 2 would be informed, hey, this number 6 guy is pretty tricky, and if he starts acting weird, he might just be messing with you, as opposed to yada, 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 everything that happens. Maybe we can talk about it when the episode's over.
Number 2 fires the supervisor of the control room and like demands that everyone else put someone else in charge. At least he doesn't do a Vader and kills him and then puts someone else in charge.
Yeah, it's not really that kind of show, I guess.
But he demands that they break up this conspiracy.
Mm-hmm.
So, and then back at his house, number 2 sees the message in the personal ads. And yeah, here's the translation he has. There's more harm in the village than is dreamt of.
Mm-hmm.
And as this is going on, number 14 is telling number 2 that I want to take care of him. Just let me do it. Let me kill him. Let me do something. And number 2 is like, no, he's very important to our masters. And, if anything happens to him, they'll know that it was on purpose. Which lends credence to your theory, Zach.
Well, you could go either way. I mean, either way, he's important and they don't want to just kill him.
Yeah.
But there you go.
But then, as this happens, number 6 arrives at number 2's house and says that he was summoned. It's like, someone with your voice called me over the telephone and identified themselves as number 2. Someone must be impersonating you. Which, of course, freaks out number 2.
Yeah, that's the only explanation, is that someone's impressing number 2. Now that number 6 is full of it.
But then is the most ridiculous moment in this episode.
Yeah,
so 14.
The weird fight scene.
Let's lead up to it first. Okay. Number 14 is getting in number 6's face and is like, someone really should put you in your place. And why don't you? He's like, Kosho? Sure, I challenge you. Mm-hmm. And then they go to what's that trampoline park called?
Slam ball. Oh, wait, no. The other one. Fly zone or something like that.
Yeah, something like that. Yeah. So they're, in my mind, when I just pictured it now, like they were wearing those ridiculous sumo outfits, like, which have padding in them too, but they were not. But I want that to happen. Is that they're in the sumo outfits and trampoline. But no, they were just trampolining. And they're like having a fight. And like there's water in between the 2 trampolines, as well as like a ledge on the side where they could jump up onto. And I think, is the object to try to dunk the other person in the water? Seemingly.
I think so.
But we don't ever see it happen. We just see them being held over the water.
Well, then he gives up. I think is the idea. He,
But
like,
we don't see
conceives.
that. Well, we see that happening, and as it's happening, there's like some stereotypically Asian music.
Yeah.
Yeah, there
It
was.
was so
It
weird.
wasn't to the degree of the like na 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 na, which I hate.
Right.
But it was still kind of like
It wasn't
stereotypically
good.
Asian, which I
Yeah.
hated.
So the
And-
scene is like mind-boggling to me. What's up, Sundeep?
I was gonna say, and then it ends with like the gong and then banging into
Oh,
each
that's
other. I'm
right.
like, what is any of
I
this?
don't know, but
So that's what's so crazy is they built this whole set, and maybe you just get a couple trampolines together and it's not a big deal. But it's like it's a 45-second scene that doesn't serve the story at all.
uh-uh.
And it's not like there's not action in the rest of the episode, because there is.
Uh-huh.
Also, one stray observation is that number 6 appears to be wearing Converse All-Stars when they have the
Huh.
shot of his foot.
That's kind of amazing.
That's great.
You might want to go back and double check though.
All right. But the scene just ends without any real sort of resolution to why they're doing it. What is this? What does Kasho have? It's not.
Well, I don't think there can be an explanation for that.
Hold on. From the Prisoner Wiki,
Uh-huh.
because of course there is one.
Mhm.
Kasho appeared prominently in the episode "It's Your Funeral." According to Kasho
Oh.
rules, one must knock the other into a 4x8 tank of water. Upon successful dunking, the Kasho match is over. It sounds easy, but there are plenty of opportunities to shatter one's sternum. Kasho was invented by Patrick McGoohan.
Wow, that Patrick McGoohan can do anything.
Yeah, I know.
Now I have to watch that episode to just see all of the rest of more of Kasho.
I want to see
How do you-
Kasho
how
on
do you-
ESPN 8 or whatever.
How do you
ESPN
break your
Ocho.
sternum? How do you even break your sternum in Kasho? Like,
I assume if you like
yeah.
hit the side of a trampoline
Yeah,
Wow.
that's,
Or on
that's
the
would be my
ledge.
guess.
okay.
next time Air Zone's open, I am challenging Zach to Kasho. Do you accept,
We
Zach?
need to bring our helmets.
Zach,
Yeah,
you
we
have
can
to
try
accept.
I accept, of course. I can't
Yeah.
lose my status in the village. They're going to knock me down a number.
Now that we're done with Kasho.
I don't think we're ever going to be done with Kasho.
So, Six is walking around. He sees some pigeons on a roof and gets an idea. He goes over to the shop to buy a small notebook, and he also buys a cuckoo clock. But the grocer comes and is trying to offer him, this particular clock, and he's like, no, I like this one. It's not just looking at the clock, but also the box it comes in, which has a flap at the bottom or the top with a hinge. So this was the one thing that he did, quote unquote, suspiciously. That was like, is that suspicious though? Because the grocer calls number 2 and tells him that he bought a cuckoo clock, but not because he bought the clock, but because the grocer tried to offer him one, and he bought a different one. And the grocer said it looked like he was looking for a specific one. I'm like,
Well, that's
really?
like a spy thing.
Yeah, but I mean, he just could not like that other clock and just likes this clock better.
I don't think so.
I know. I'm like, that was the one thing where it's like, is it actually that suspicious? Not really, but I guess if they're watching everything he does, sure, fine.
Yeah.
Well, it reminds me of an episode of MacGyver. The
Okay.
old one, of course, where MacGyver is going to a motel and he has to eavesdrop on a guy in a specific room. So he goes to the clerk and he was like, I would like room 738, please. And the clerk was like, we have lots of rooms. He says, no, it has to be 738 because my horoscope says that even numbers or whatever are good for me. Some kind of crazy explanation. And the clerk is like, you're from California, aren't you? So the point is, I could see it being something like that, where it's like he needs that clock because there's a message from number 1 or whatever.
But it's not that suspicious. He's not like, oh, I must have this. He's like, no, I just think I like this one better.
Okay.
Yeah, at least that's the impression I got. But maybe because of the fact that they're watching him so closely, anything he does is suspicious.
Mm-hmm.
That's most likely
So
it.
back at his house, number 6 is using the box with the hinged top and the pencil to create the stereotypical trap
Yeah.
for a bird.
Mm-hmm.
He has the sandwich in. So yeah.
Yeah, and he has it held open with a pencil. So he sets that up, and he's waiting for a bird to come get it. And as he's doing that, he brings the cuckoo clock over to number 2's door, and just places it there, walks away.
Yeah.
They're watching him do this. They think it's a bomb, so they call over the bomb squad, who is not very protected for a bomb squad.
Yeah, the village bomb squad. Apparently, they have one.
They have
no,
helmets,
no
though.
police force, but a bomb squad.
Yeah, it's not the Hurt Locker suit.
No, they have like World War II helmets on, and I don't think even they had any padding or anything. They just were just like,
They just like brought a bucket of sand and put
Yeah.
the bomb, like the clock in there.
and as they come in and take that away, back at number 6's house, a bird walks in to the trap, gets trapped, and number 6 takes the bird over to the woods. And the cuckoo clock is taken over to the bomb range to be disassembled, which, yes, they have a bomb range apparently as well, which I assume we've never seen at this point either.
Well, it's not on the map of your village, which also came with the DVDs.
Ooh.
But I would presume that it's like out somewhere in like administration or whatever.
I guess. But I mean, like, the fact that there are all those sandbags and everything, it's clearly meant to be a place where you dismantle bombs. So, like, okay, how many different bombs have they actually had to disassemble?
You know, maybe they're just very prepared for any possibility.
Yeah, I want to know how a bomb would do up against Rover. It'd pop it like a balloon.
Also, that Rover didn't show up this episode, and I was kind of disappointed.
He doesn't need to show up in every episode.
Yeah, exactly.
I know, just the fact that like his appearance, I was like so confused and just confused by him. So I was just expecting him to show up all the time.
Well, he only shows up when people are trying to escape, and number 6 didn't try to escape in this episode.
That's very true.
Yeah.
All right.
He doesn't show up enough in the rest of the series, though. So,
so the clock is disassembled in the bomb range, and number 2, like, is watching them as they're doing it. They don't find anything in there. But back in the control room, they see that number 6 is approaching a restricted area. He goes up to a cliff top, takes out the notepad, writes down some numbers, and attaches the note to the leg of the pigeon. And back in the control room, they see this. They're tracking the bird. They use radar. They get up the beam ready, which is like this laser beam that comes out
like a laser gun,
from like a flagpole. Is that what it was?
Yeah, it was a flagpole. It just like extends up. And
it was like a little like a antenna that comes out, like an old car antenna that like extends up from the flagpole and like points. And I'm a little disappointed we didn't see the laser like hitting the bird or something like that, but I assume the effects would not have been great for it.
Yeah, they would have looked like the Starship Enterprise's phasers, probably.
Hey, those phasers look good. I've never. Like,
there's a lot to complain about, but that's not one of them.
Yeah, no. So they retrieve the message from the bird, and it's these numbers 20, 60, 40, 47, 67, 81, 91, 80, which reading them out loud makes me feel like Hurley from Lost.
This also reminds me of an episode of Burn Notice where Michael Weston's being surveyed and he picks up the phone and reads a bunch of numbers, and then it pans down to show that he's reading prices off a catalog.
That's great. They run those numbers through the Bat computer, basically. It says something like, your message tomorrow, 0600 hours by visual signal.
Yeah. It's basically
so they're like, all right, now we need to watch him at 0600. What's he going to do? So number 6 at 6 o'clock a.m. takes a mirror and a watch and leaves his house. Number 2 is watching him as he's doing this. He goes out near the stone boat and out to the beach and uses a mirror to signal Morse code, like by signaling with a light or with the sun, the rays of the sun. And like they're trying to see, are there any ships around? Anyone they could be signaling? There's no submarines, no airplanes, there's nothing.
Right.
And this is where the message reads, the patty cake rhyme.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Which once they said that, I was cracking up. And they run the rhyme through the computer, but it reads exactly as the same rhyme. And like number 2 is like, there must be a special code that the computer doesn't know. So,
it could be a code to the right people, but I don't think so.
But so yeah, number 2 is just cracked. Further drive it home. Number 6 goes over to what looks like, is this the restaurant? Because we didn't see the restaurant before, so I don't know if this is just the restaurant or if this is just another outdoor area. But he's sitting out with a bunch of tables, and number 6 goes over to number 14 and like starts talking to him, whispering to him.
Yeah.
About like, how did you sleep, and like saying stuff to him that's like nonsense, but nothing stuff. As they're talking, one of the waiters sees them talking. Well, sees number 6 whispering to number 14 and reports to number 2, which now number 2 is suspicious of number 14.
Yeah, he actually accuses 14 of working with sticks and like slaps him.
Yep.
Yeah.
And
There's a lot of slapping in this episode.
And yeah, so like
And
dismisses him, says, you're a traitor, get out of here. Number 6 is listening to a record at home. I was actually disappointed that it's not the same record.
Oh, the one from before?
Yes, the La Lesion. It was not this. It was just something else, but he's listening to a record. Number 14 confronts him. They have this fight, which basically like destroys number 6's home, like all the things, like his Japanese style, like the things that block you if you're like changing.
Oh, it's like a paper wall.
Not quite. It's like one of those dressing. I don't know, dressing partitions, something. Yeah, there's one of those. They break his chair. They break his table.
And his light bulbs and his lights.
His lamps. Yeah, they break everything in there.
It seems weird based on, since we just watched the first episode, it would have been kind of funny if they were fighting and then the voice is like, maintenance to number 6 house, cleanup request on aisle 3 or whatever.
That would be good, but we don't have that. And at the end of the fight, like number 6 gets 14 in like a police hold and throws him out the window.
I think it was a door.
Was it?
It had a handle. It had a handle.
Oh, okay, it could have been the door to like the balcony or something. Okay.
Number 6 doesn't really kill people. At least not directly.
Oh, I was wondering about this. Is he dead? Like, it didn't look like he was dead. Like, if he was dead, I feel like there would have been repercussions. So maybe he's just like knocked out. And then number 6 goes to visit number 2 in the dome, and number 2 is over there, like leaning over the bicycle or the penny farthing.
Yeah,
and starts taunting number 2.
And he's like sweating, and like 2 was like sweating.
He is. He's not doing good. Yeah. And he says that number 6 is clearly D6 sent by their masters to spy on him, and number 6 is like, oh, that's not true. But if it was true, then you have acted inappropriately. You've interfered with my investigation, and like is saying, what is XO4 gonna think about this?
Yeah,
it's basically exactly what he wrote in the paper in the very beginning.
Yep.
It basically 2 like fully bought the conspiracy.
But yeah, and so he convinces and coerces number 2 to report himself, and says that that he needs to be replaced, and so presumably in the next episode, because of this, we'll get a new number 2, and that's the end of the episode.
Yeah. I know you haven't really watched the show, but there's always a new number 2.
A new number 2, but for this, I assume this is one of the few times that we see exactly them replacing him. That's not just, it's a new day, it's a new number 2. This whole time it's like, I've got rid of you. Yeah,
it was great. It's also one of the few episodes where number 6 is like has the upper hand.
And like this is I liked. So, should we get into some spy fact versus spy fiction?
Yeah, you want to go first?
Yeah,
because we both have some this time, Sundeep. Get ready.
So I've got 2 things. Now, one is about the pigeon, and this is maybe a little bit obvious, but carrier pigeons are a real thing. Obviously, the pigeon that number 2 or number 6 captured was probably not a real carrier pigeon, but they've been used as early as 300 BC, 3000 BC, in Egypt, as well as more recently, I believe in in some of the world wars. Well, in World War II, they used homing pigeons to capture surveillance photos. Not quite the same thing, but I just like that. Always like the pigeons who use cameras, and that they're very smart and can be trained pretty easily. And but my other thing that I thought was really interesting was about the code that number 6 used, the number code. So when I saw all those numbers, I thought about what could this code be? And it was not what I thought it was, but there's a code very similar to what he used, where you have numbers which are substituted by entire words, not just letters. It's called the Culper Code Book, which was used by the Culper spy ring, which is America's very first spy ring, which was founded by George Washington during the Revolutionary War. So there are few ways that the code works. There are certain things where there's exact numbers which translates to words. For example, the number for 20 would be a fair. Like, I tried actually putting it through, see what the code would be, but it didn't work out. So you have like numbers 1 through 654 all have specific words associated to them. But then you could also use the numerical alphabet to like, if there's a word that doesn't exist, you can create a new code with it. And then you also can use like a tilde if there's something close to it, but it's not quite that word. So you can sort of figure it out. It's like, which is a very interesting. And I've used this code a few times with the Spy Museum. Like that's one of the things they're big on the Culper Spy Ring because they have at the Spy Museum. Plug for this, my usual plug for the Spy Museum here. They actually have the letter which George Washington wrote that founded that spy ring.
Nice.
Yeah.
That's
all
cool.
right. So what do you
think
guys?
I saw that letter. Okay, so I have a couple things. So the first is behind the scenes.
Okay.
Since you guys liked Rover so much, I wanted to tell you, this is again from the Ultimate Guide or whatever, that in the first episode, they used a balloon for Rover because it replaced a mechanical device that could travel on land or on sea and could climb walls. That I wanted to see, but they lost the model when it sank in the water outside the village.
What did it look like?
It looked like Rover.
Oh, so it was a ball. Okay, I thought. See, when you said that, I thought you meant that there was supposed to be a much more complicated device that they were going to use, but then he got lost, so they replaced it with a ball.
Oh, I don't know. I'm reading it as the Rover device looked like a balloon, but it was like super. But how would a balloon climb walls?
I think it might be right with my analysis of that.
Okay. Well, I didn't do
yeah.
much research. Okay, so here's the good stuff, guys.
All right.
Here we go. In World War II, there was the Special Operations Executive, right?
Yes,
we talked about them. So according to a book that we may or may not have already covered in a Microdot episode called D-Day Girls by Sarah Rose, they talk about how the security section was responsible for recruiting mistakes by the SOE. Quote, men who proved unsuited to the rigors of life as an agent in the field. Agents who were flawed, indiscreet, profligate, I don't even know what that means, libidinous, unstable, drunk, or in any other way useless, and went through the training course to be on the SOE, were sent to the Highlands of Scotland to the number 6 Special Workshop School, otherwise known as the Forgetting School.
What?
Yes. Failed trainees were warehoused at a hunting estate far away from the war until their knowledge of secrets were like out of date and they weren't considered a security risk.
Whoa.
Wow.
The village is real.
Yeah. The mansion for useless agents was a quarantine for the resentful, a ghetto of the bored. Now, according to Christopher J. Murphy's Security and Special Operations book, this facility, number 6 Special Workshop School, was an inspiration for George Markstein's 1974 novel called The Cooler, which is also a nickname for it. It has been claimed that Markstein found out about it while working as a journalist for the U.S. Forces magazine Stars and Stripes. Now, the book has been forgotten, but the influence of the number 6 school can also be seen in the television series The Prisoner, which Markstein developed along with the show star Patrick McGoohan.
So it is direct inspiration. That is fascinating.
Yeah.
And what I want to know is why hasn't there been a movie made about this place? It would be perfect for a comedy.
Like The Cooler? Like with the failed secret agents. It's like
a bunch like The Losers.
That would be good. Yeah.
It's like Lower Decks mixed with The Losers, mixed with Archer. I don't know. I could go on.
Yeah, I can see that. Yeah.
Like there's a situation where all the real secret agents aren't available or they can't deal with an issue, so they gotta call out the loser secret agents.
Well, that almost sounds like Johnny English in a way.
It's a similar idea, but it can be a little bit more grounded, I guess. Or maybe you don't want it to be grounded. Okay, so that is it for Fact versus Fiction. Do we have any favorite quotes you want to do from the second episode?
Yes, I had one, but now I have to remember. Oh, yes, here it is. Actually, Sundeep, do you have any before I go?
I didn't actually write any down. Sorry. I did like how the secret message at the very end was patty cake, Bigger's man.
It's pretty good, yeah.
I like that too.
So my quote is from number 2. It's actually the last line of the episode. It's, I have to report a breakdown in control. Number 2 needs to be replaced. Yes, this is number 2 reporting.
Interesting note to end the episode on. So as I said, my favorite quote is "No, you will," but I also liked when number 2 is talking to somebody. I think it was 46, the surveillance guy. Number 6 sent a code. What does it mean? And the guy says, "It means what it says." And number 2 gets really mad.
That's what it's referring to, the patty cake, isn't it?
No, I think it's something before that, but I don't remember.
It's referring to the happy birthday message.
Oh, that.
Oh, yeah.
Oh,
That's
that's
right.
right. I forgot about that. Yeah. All right. So, shall we get into our ratings?
Yes, as always, our ratings are on a scale of 1 to 10 martinis, 1 being in a horrible spy movie, 10 being amazing, great, wonderful. How would you guys rate these 2 episodes of The Prisoner?
And you can give 1 rating per episode.
Okay.
Sundeep is our guest. Do you want to go first?
Yeah, sure. Well, I'm a huge fan of the series. So I'm going to be rating these both very highly. For Arrival, it does a really good job setting everything up. So I'm going to go with actually, I guess, a 9.5.
9.5. That may be our highest rating ever on this show
Well,
or on the podcast. Yeah.
But it's his right to get
Yeah.
it.
No. Yeah, that is entirely all right. So
it does an excellent job in setting up like what turns out is going to turn out to be a really interesting series, and it really hits all the main points in a very it sets up a very unique premise really well. So
all right.
Yeah. And do I rate the next one right now?
Yep.
Or?
Yep.
I would say Hammer into Anvil is also a really good episode. I would rate it at 9 out of 10. It loses points for Kosho. I did not like that. But everything else I really liked. So I also rate this one very highly.
All right.
Nice.
Zach, do you want to go next?
Sure. I also quite like the series, even though I've only watched it through once, or at least every episode once, and I've seen more. The first episode was really good. It set the tone really well. And about halfway through it, I was like, I'm going to give it my first 9 out of 10 rating ever. However, unfortunately, I think the latter half kind of suffers a little bit. I don't know why they started bringing in this woman and these other people in like the last quarter of the episode. It didn't feel like felt like it tacked on to the end of the story, and it wasn't so coherent. So I'm going to give the first episode an 8 out of 10 because it is really good. And then Hammer into Anvil, I'm going to rate also slightly lower than that. I'm going to give it a 7 out of 10 because it's very enjoyable to watch. And it's, as always, it's really well made. But unfortunately for this one, the age kind of shows a little bit because once you figure out what number 6 is doing, you're just sort of waiting for it to happen.
Interesting.
And I didn't find that so engaging. I'm kind of like, oh, what's going to happen next? Oh, it's just more of the same until eventually the episode ends.
All right.
So maybe it works better for some people than it did for me, but I still consider it to be a good episode on the whole.
All right. So I'm going to have slightly different opinions from you guys. So for Arrival, I'm going to rate it a 7 out of 10. It's interesting, and it does well in setting up the world, but it also bears that burden of having to set up that entire world. And it's good. Like, I liked it. But if you remember, we're a spy podcast. Not a lot of spying going on in that one. Like, it's really entertaining and really interesting. But the spy action, kind of low on that point, because he's not the one who's in control. He's the one who's having to figure out what's going on, and you never get a resolution to it. So on that, I'm going to rate it a 7, which is still a high rating for us, but it's not.
It's good for you. Actually, no, you tend to rate them pretty high. So
I do.
It's fine. Yeah.
And I actually enjoyed Hammer into Anvil more than the pilot, because this is where you can see his spy skills. You can see his manipulation. You can see that he's good at what he would have been good at what he did, because he's able, without laying a finger on number 2, and just using his spy skills to get number 2 to just crack entirely. And so he uses things that he knew, like just coded messages and everything. Even though he wasn't using them as traditionally used, he used those to just break number 2. So I like that a whole lot. So I'm going to rate that an 8 out of 10.
So the question I've been waiting the whole podcast to ask you is, are you going to watch the rest of the series now?
Yeah, I think I will. I wasn't not necessarily sold entirely on watching the whole series by Arrival, and I guess maybe since we know that Hammer into Anvil is the highest rated episode of the entire series, maybe that's the high, and maybe I don't need to watch anything else. But there's only 17 episodes or so I think it's something that is well worth my time.
All right.
Well, there was another episode that I wanted to watch for a second one as well, but I deferred to Sundeep, called The Schizoid Man, which that was my personal favorite one. So you know at least that one will be good.
Yeah,
or
and we can always bring Sundeep back for a microdot if we just want to cover a one-off episode.
Yep.
I would recommend watching a few of the other episodes. I started rewatching the series, and they're pretty solid.
Hmm.
I mean, one thing that I noticed as I started watching the series in order is that as time goes on, then the number 2s get more desperate and use more extreme measures on number 6. So
Interesting.
even though it is an episodic series, there is like a progression in that way.
Mm-hmm.
And one thing I do want to tell you right now
is this about the elephant in the room?
the ending?
Oh, no. Oh, I was... Okay. No. Well, you know what? Because I am going to watch it, so don't tell me too much about the ending.
Okay.
Yeah, don't tell him about the ending, Sundeep. I want to hear his
Alright.
reaction.
Okay.
Well, when I was talking about the elephant in the room, though, I was talking about the remake.
I don't watch it.
All right. Yeah. I'm going to... the issue is there's a lot to say about it, but I'm going to just say this. Basically, I think they just tagged on the prisoner name and certain aspects of it onto a show that was different. That was like written beforehand. So it's basically
one of those.
It's one of those. It's not the prisoner. It's basically has some like surface similarities. And since I really like the show, it's infuriating to watch. So.
All right. So yeah, there's your rating for the Prisoner remake of what was it, 2009, something like that.
2009.
Something like that. Yeah.
I would say if you've watched Prisoner before, it's a 2. If you haven't watched Prisoner, original Prisoner, probably like a 4 or 5. It's still not a good show.
Nice.
All right.
Yeah. Also, I didn't realize the scale of how we're rating things, so I thought 9 was good instead of like exceptional. So.
Oh well, yeah. We try to be more fair with our 1 to 10 ratings.
Oh, okay. I thought you were rating on like the IGN score or whatever, where 7 is like, terrible or something.
Oh
No,
I mean,
we're trying to avoid that. Yeah.
Oh, okay.
Okay. Well, thank you to Sundeep for joining us. Thank you to our audience for listening today. You can find us on social media at the Sci-Fi Guys under Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram. Until next time, I'm Zach.
And I'm Christian.
And we are the Sci-Fi Guys, signing off.
Thank you for listening. If you enjoyed our podcast, please be sure to rate and review us on iTunes. The theme music is by Jer Fitzgerald and Big Man Joe. Media reviewed by our podcast are the intellectual property of their respective copyright holders, and no infringement is intended.
This is a personal podcast. Any views, statements, or opinions expressed in this podcast are personal and belong solely to the participants. They do not represent those of people, institutions, or organizations that the participants may or may not be associated with in a professional or personal capacity unless explicitly stated. Any views or opinions are not intended to malign any religion, ethnic group, club, organization, company, or individual.
You can find our podcast on social media at the Sci-Fi Guys on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram.